Today we're continuing working our way through 2 Samuel. We are going to look at chapters 2 through the beginning of chapter 5. If you'll remember in the introduction to 1 and 2 Samuel, we talked about one of the reasons why this book was written is because it defends the leader's actions and decisions, more specifically David's right to rule. And we're talking about that today. We're talking about how David became king and how that dynasty shift happened. And we're also going to answer the question, okay, Ms. Nancy, this is just dry and dusty history. Does it really matter here today? Here's a spoiler alert, it really does, and we will talk about that.
Hi friends, I'm Miss Nancy Ruth.
And I'm Mr. Roger.
We want to see kids living for Jesus.
So just to catch you up on where we are, Saul was the first king of Israel, and the Lord rejected him as king over Israel and anointed David to take his place as the next king. And even though David saved Saul's life more than once, Saul hunted David to kill him, but David wouldn't touch him. And finally, Saul and his son Jonathan died in battle. And now we're at the point where David needs to step up to become this next king and unify the kingdom under his leadership, under his rule. So first thing he does is he gets on his knees and prays and says, God, do you want me to go up to Judah? And God said, yes. And more specifically, I want you to go to Hebron. And that's where he went. He went to Hebron. And he took his wives with him, and he took all the people who had been following him, his warriors and their families, and all of them came with him to Hebron. And there the people of Judah crowned David as king of Judah. So that's one tribe out of 12, at least at the start. Okay, and it's a pretty large tribe. Okay, so there he was in Judah, and we have this summary statement here that he ruled in Hebron for 7 years and 6 months. And while one of the first things he did was send word to Jabesh Gilead, which was a town up north, and he thanked them for taking care of Saul and Jonathan's bodies when they were killed, and you can check that out in this video. And he also encouraged them to accept him as their leader as well, and saying he would take care of them just like Saul had took care of them. Then we come across our first major roadblock in David's journey to becoming king of all of Israel, and that is Abner. If you may remember, Abner was the commander of Saul's army, and he sided with Ishbosheth, who was the son of Saul, and he became king at 40. All right, and so we see here, let me get out so I can see where it's at. Hold on, skip a page. There it is. Okay, so Abner took Ishbosheth and brought him to where he had his headquarters, and we'll get to that in a minute. And he made him king over Gilead, Ashuri, and Jezreel, and also over the tribes of Ephraim and Benjamin and all of Israel. And of course, that is except for Judah, who had claimed David as their king. Now, Joab was the commander of Saul's. We have Abner with Ishbosheth, and we have Joab with David. So Joab was the commander of David's army. Boy, I'm getting names mixed up today. I'm glad they're on the screen. So anyway, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Joab and Abner brought their forces, and they met in Gibeon, and they had a showdown there. And long story short, it did not go well for Abner and Ishbosheth's army. They were just stomped. And so Abner and his army just hightailed it out of there. And Asahel was Joab's brother, and he was a really fast runner. And he set his sights specifically on Abner. And he dogged Abner and ran after him and would not let up. And Abner turned back and he said, dude, let me go. Let me go. We're good. You just let me go. And Asahel said, nope. And he kept right after him, trying to get him. And Abner looked back again and he said, dude, seriously, let me go. I mean, how could I look at your brother Joab in the face if I hurt you or killed you? How could I look him in the face? Dude, seriously, let me go. And Asahel's like, nope. And he kept right on after him. So Abner killed Asahel. Yeah, Asahel. He killed him. And his brothers, Joab and the other brother, Abishai, found out about it, and they were right behind him, not too far behind him, of course, Asahel's faster. But they came across the body, and they were not happy, as you might imagine, and they were still all worked up from this battle and this chase. And they chased and they dogged Abner and his whole army up until they took a position on top of a hill. It was coming up on sunset. And finally, Abner called to Joab and he said, "Must the sword devour forever? Don't you realize that this will end in bitterness? How long before you order your men to stop pursuing their brothers?" This was like a civil war. This is the civil war that was going on. And Joab answered, "As surely as God lives, if you had not spoken, the men would have continued their pursuit of the brothers until morning and would not have shown mercy. But because they had this conversation, Joab sounded the horn and everybody went back to their respective places. Some took a little longer than others, and they also took care of the dead who had died in battle. And then we have one of these bookend summary statements that says that's the end of an episode. And it says, the war between the house of Saul and the house of David lasted for a long time. And we know that Ishbosheth reigned for 2 years, so it was probably at least 2 years. David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. And we also see that in addition to Abigail and Ahinoam, David took some other wives, and he started having kids while he was there in Hebron. And so that then we end of scene. That's part of that what that bookmark storytelling technique is. And we switch scenes to see what's happening now with Abner and Ishbosheth. And Ishbosheth did something really stupid. He accused Abner of sleeping with Rizpah, who was one of Saul's concubines. A concubine is like a lesser wife, okay? Lesser in ranking, but still a wife, okay? So this wasn't just about this falsehood. This was not true. It wasn't just about that, although that's part of the reason why Abner got really upset about it. But by accusing Abner of doing this, he wasn't just accusing him of sleeping with somebody else's wife. He was accusing him of making a grab for the throne. And that's what this was really about. Because Ishbosheth was accusing Abner of trying to wheedle his way into Saul's family so that he had a right to rule himself. That's what this accusation was about. And understandably, Abner was really upset by this. And he said, basically, "What are you thinking?" And I love how he gets specific here. He says, "I faithfully served your father Saul, and I have faithfully followed and served you too. And there are so many times I could have taken you captive and delivered you to David myself, and I did not do that." What in the world are you thinking? And he didn't let him off the hook with that. He said, "I quit. I'm done with you. I'm completely done," which is really bad because he's the only reason Ishbosheth even had a place. And so when he quit, he said, "May God deal with Abner, be it ever so severely, if I do not do for David what the Lord promised him on oath, and transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul, and establish David's throne over Israel and Judah, from Dan to Beersheba, from the north to the south, all of it unified." Boy, he messed up, and he knew it. But he was scared of Abner, so he couldn't really do anything. So what happened next? Abner left Ishbosheth, and he sent word to David, and he said, "I'm switching sides. I'm all yours. I'm behind you. I'm going to do whatever I can to make you king over the unified Israel." And David set some conditions before he would accept this. He said, "All right, but I want my wife back." He had a wife named Michal, who was Saul's daughter. And when he had to run for his life from Saul, Saul gave Michal to another man to be as her second husband. And David said, "I want my wife back." And so Abner got Ishbosheth to do it, and he sent Michal back to David. And Michal's second husband, Paltiel, did not want her to go. He followed her, crying and grieving and just not wanting to let go. He wanted to keep his wife. And finally, Abner sent him back, said, "Nope, you go home. She's going to David." So then Abner went to all of Israel, all the tribes of Israel, and he gathered all the elders together. So he didn't go to each tribe individually. All the elders came together in a meeting and took word of what happened in that meeting back to their tribes to tell the people what had happened. And in this conference with the elders, Abner said, "For some time you have wanted to make David your king," which I find really interesting here. Abner had some serious sway if he was able to keep the tribes of Israel from doing what they wanted and following David. So now he's telling them, "I know you've always wanted this," and he says, "Now do it. For the Lord promised David, by my servant David, I will rescue my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from the hand of their enemies. So he said, go for it. Follow David. Forget Ishbosheth. And then he went to the tribe of Benjamin. And you remember, Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin, and he spent his most of his time there in the tribe of Benjamin. And so he knew those people. Those were like the extended family members and that clan. And so Abner went to each one of those individually, heads of households, and talked to them individually and told them pretty much the same thing. So then Abner went to Hebron to actually be in David's presence. And he said, okay, David, here you go. All of the kingdom is unified under you. Everybody's got your back. We're all for you. We want to crown you as king over everybody. And David had a big party and celebration and welcomed him with open arms. Now, Joab was out on a mission, and when he came back, he found out about this, and he was not happy. He gave David a piece of his mind. How could you let that traitor back? Don't you know what this guy has done? And you welcome him with open arms? But David said, no. You don't get it. I'm standing with, you're not going to change my mind. I'm going to accept him, and he's switched sides, and he's proved he's faithful. I'm going to accept him. Well, that did not make Joab happy. And so at this point, Abner had left to start to go home, and Joab sent word after him to bring him back, saying, hey, the king wants to see you again. Wink, wink. Turns out, no. He was setting up an ambush, and he killed Abner. And the reason he did is because Abner had killed Joab's brother, Asahel, in battle. David found out about this, and he was not happy. What did you do? I could just hear it. That's not the right thing to do. Now, if you remember, David has proved over and over again what he thinks on this matter. He said over and over something similar to what he said here in 2 Samuel 3, verse 39b. May the Lord repay the evildoer according to his evil deeds. He always asked the Lord to take vengeance for him. He did not take vengeance himself. Doesn't mean he wasn't tempted, he just didn't, okay? And here Joab is taking vengeance for himself because of his brother, okay? And David said, no. May Joab's family never be without someone who has a running sore or leprosy or leans on a crutch or falls by the sword or lacks food. In other words, I want nothing to do with this. And in fact, because you took it into your own hands, the Lord's going to punish you and your family. And David gave proper burial to Abner and grieved him and mourned him and gave him that proper funeral, like I said. And the people heard about this and they said, that's a good thing. I'm impressed with David. And in fact, everything David did, they were impressed. And that helped unify the hearts of the people, not just the alliance of the people. They were all behind David. And Ishbosheth, well, he knew he was done for. He was right. A couple of men from Benjamin went and snuck and killed him, and then brought back proof to David and said, this is the day the Lord has avenged my Lord the king against Saul and his offspring. Yay! And David said, do you remember what happened to the messenger who brought me similar word that Saul and his sons like Jonathan had died in battle, and thought I would be all excited and happy about the news? Do you remember what happened to him? You can check out what happened in this video. Basically, David had said at that time, your blood be on your own head. Your own mouth testified against you when you said, I have killed the Lord's anointed. He was not pleased. And in fact, that messenger was killed. And then David said, in this instance here with this new messenger that came, how much more when wicked men have killed an innocent man in his own house and on his own bed, should I now demand his blood from your hand? I can't see that underneath there. Hold on, I got to make it bigger because there's something weird on the screen. Okay. Demand his blood from your hand and rid the earth of you. So he says, same's going to be true of you. What you did is wrong and you're going to pay for it. And he had them killed too. Now, do you remember the covenant that David made with Jonathan, the unbreakable friendship pact that they made? They had promised each other. Jonathan had made David promise, but show me unfailing kindness like the Lord's kindness as long as I live, so that I may not be killed, and do not ever cut off your kindness from my family, not even when the Lord has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth. Now, at the moment, it seems like there's nobody left for David to keep that promise with. but there was. Mephibosheth is a son of David, and he's the only one that survived to this point. And the night that his dad and grandfather were killed in battle, his nurse grabbed him up and was going to escape with him to try to save his life, but he fell and became lame in both feet. But at least he was alive then, and he's still alive now. And so remember Mephibosheth. We'll come back to him later. Okay, so then we have another bookmark that says end of the section, and we see that this summary statement, that David was 30 years old when he became king, and he ruled for 40 years. So he was 70 years old when he died. And of that 40 years, 7 years and 6 months were in Hebron, and 33 years he ruled in Jerusalem. And we will talk about that next week in the next video in this series. Now, time for that question. Miss Nancy Ruth, this is all dry and dusty history. What in the world does that have to do with us here today? Okay, here's the thing. David was the beginning of a royal line that started with David and went down through the generations, beginning there when David was crowned in roughly 1010 BC, all the way to Jesus, who was born in 6 or 4 BC, who then was crucified for our sins and then came back to life again. He ascended into heaven, and there he rules over all and is still alive today. And he is coming back, and he will judge the living and the dead, and only those whose names are written in the Lamb's Book of Life will live with him forever. And what that means is the people who have trust Jesus as their Lord and Savior, they are the ones that will be saved because he is King and Savior and Messiah. And here's the thing. It's also relevant because God always keeps his promises. God made a special covenant with David, and he said, when your days are over, David, and you rest with your ancestors, that means he dies, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish his kingdom. He's talking about Jesus here. And it goes on to say, he is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. And Jesus does reign, and he will reign forever and ever. You can learn more in this video. If you want to follow along on the life of David, you can check out this playlist. And if you want to find out how Jerusalem became the capital and why all that mess happened and how it became the center of worship for the Jewish people, check out this video, which I will put up next week.
Don't forget to subscribe. We post memory verses in 4 translations, key passages, answers to Bible questions, and more. Check out our store and freebies at parentroadmin.com. We love you, friends. See you next time.